Welcome, everybody. Today is March 26, 2022. We always forget to say that on these video recordings. And it's my privilege to introduce Vamp and Tramp, which many of you are really well acquainted with. So we have, if you're not acquainted with Vamp and Tramp, I think you're going to get a great introduction today from Vicky, Stewart, and Lindsay. Ellinas.
Yeah, you got it.
Ellinas, yeah. So of course, you know that they are booksellers in Birmingham, Alabama, and now mainly on the internet, it seems, which is working great. And yeah, they do fine printing. They represent all kinds of books, and I hear there's going to be quite a range today, so that'll be great. Their website, I'll put the website in chat, but it's really easy, vampandtramp.com, if you ever want to look them up, right? And until 2019, Bill and Vicky were traveling all around the country showing their book collections at colleges and universities. Maybe some of you were lucky enough to see them in person when they were at the University of Puget Sound. It was great. But the past 2 years, of course, because of the pandemic, they've been mostly showing their work, only showing their work online. Vicky's a retired IT person, so maybe she can help us with our IT problems. And Lindsay has been working with Vicky since 2013, I think she said. And yeah, and I have a note here that Lindsay is a performance artist as well as a makeup artist. I'm really interested to hear about that, but if we have time. And all that said, I'm just going to turn it over to them because they have a lot to share with us. Welcome, Vicky and Lindsay.
Thank you. If you can pin Lindsay's view so that it comes up on your screen all the way, and that way you can get a better look at the books. We're going to start, if there's a particular book that you would like to see, if you got one of our list, let us know and we'll make sure we show it. We've had a few requests already, and so we're going to show those first. The first one we're going to show, actually, we're doing first because it takes a little setup to show it. This is a Vermont artist, Carolyn Shattuck. Actually, she's originally from Canada, and she does a lot of work. She likes paper, and so she uses a lot of paper. She also likes pop-ups. She is very interested in the environment and also in women's issues. So this one is called Wardrobe Chronicles, and as you can see, Lindsay's opened the wardrobe, and it has drawers like doors like an old-fashioned wardrobe cabinet. And when you pull it out, you get the components of this book. The blue cloths that are laid out have the names of the women whose stories are in here. There are actually 10 different stories in this one. Carolyn was looking to raise awareness of women's rights and actually had done a large installation, but this was part of a larger installation. When you open it up and you'll see the names of the women, there are what I call slip and slot paper dolls that she's designed that you can stand up and have them on top of their name or around the cloth of the stories, and you can mix and match. It's really up to you. Along with our standing women, we have their stories that also come out of one of the little packets. In the pamphlets, you'll have stories, for instance, like a young woman named Hosea, Hossai. She worked for an organization for developmental alternatives that came out of Washington, D.C., but she lived and worked in Kandahar, Afghanistan. One day she was going home from work and she was murdered because women don't have much rights in Afghanistan. Her murderer still has not been prosecuted, or no one was arrested. There's also a story. The stories range from genital mutilation to rape to incest to abuse, to practices that are still going on today that you thought perhaps would have not be today. One such of those is that in Yemen at one time the marriage age for a young woman was at 15. They've since abolished that law, but it's up to the parents at what age their child can marry. And the story in here is about a young woman that was 13 when she was married, and married a man, considerably older than herself, and the trauma of that union. So you get an idea of what she's trying to do with this one. This one's called Wardrobe Chronicles. The next one is this is actually not a new artist to us. We had a book of his a number of years ago. He's really a printmaker and an installation artist. His name is Sean Caulfield. He's out of Canada. And I should know exactly what part of Canada, and I cannot think of that right now. But this one's called Water Circle, and I think the poet is his son or brother. The poet is Case Caulfield. As I said, Sean Caulfield is a printmaker. And this one he uses lino cuts, and the poem starts out in letterpress. What he's looking at, Sean is very interested in nature and man's encroachment into nature. This is an accordion. It extends from the front paste down. It's really quite dramatic when you see it, and he's influenced a lot by early woodcut artists from the 15th and 1600s. Oh, he's at the University of Alberta. He was inspired by the landscape of Alberta, especially along it's called a major feature in the landscape of Treaty 6 territory. But you can see he loves these big images. This one is 18 inches by 14 and a half. Closed, obviously. Small edition of 8. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Rachel Simmons. She's a Florida artist. She's in the art department at Rollins College. She does a lot of artist journals. She does a lot of collage and a lot of personal stories. This one is called This Celestial Body. And it's very tactile. All of her work is very tactile, and I don't know if she puts a finishing on it. I don't think so, but the paper is very one word I can think of is tactile. Lindsay, I can't think of another word. There's a lot of it's
texture.
It's thick. It's not real thin, so it doesn't feel flimsy. And of course, she's painted on it or drawn on it, and so you get that coating. The text on this one, as you look at Celestial Body, is she's really looking at where we are in as let's call it a celestial body within the universe. So the text is collaged on. It's I think some of the paper is actually original text or copied text that is then used as the base. But the text goes something like this: we travel around the sun, passengers of the planet, and you'll see in the background there'll be astrological information and astronomical information. You'll see the Big Dipper and things like that. But she uses a lot of words like circumvent, circumspect, circumference. And one of the things she notes in her text is that every 50,000 years, the Big Dipper changes. Every 50 seconds, her body changes. And I had never really thought about when you think about the bigger things and the smaller things. And we're passing through as celestial bodies, hurtling through time and space. But then she says, let's go again. That's a little more than what the description says on the on your list, but I hope that gives you an idea. Let's see, that's Rachel. And then Rachel Simmons, Simmons, and she's out of Winter Haven, Florida, right outside of Orlando. That's where Rollins College is. She does, it's interesting, she has started using a lot of these, in this book's based on your current trajectory. She uses, you know how you make labels with those little punch things that are plastic and then it impresses the letter on it? And based on your current trajectory, she's using mine's gone blank.
T-touch is what we used to call it.
Yeah, and then but the structure, it's a flag book, a modified flag book structure for the book itself. It is nice though that there's every part of the presentation, even the folder has information related to what she's trying to say in the book. So based on your current trajectory, she's uses the flag book structure, and I like that she, in the fold, she puts imagery there, and then she's using that whatever you called it, Lindsay, on the other side to put text. It's not a regular boy, I'm having trouble with my words today. Flag book structure, because they don't interleave. They're each independent, so that you can read the text down one row, or you can read it left to right. She also likes cartoons, so she cartooned herself, if you will. She made herself a cartoon, and you've got her little text bubbles or thought bubbles as she's thinking about the space and where are we going. She's particularly interested, she has a twin, and evidently her twin disappeared in 2018 and they don't know where he is, and so she's wondering in this where her twin is. And if you'll notice in her work, she does use a lot of different book structures. She seems to always be experimenting. This one actually, I think, has a magnet closure when you put that down.
Almost all of hers have a magnet closure.
This last one is tracking B15. She had been down to the Arctic, Lindsay? It was the Arctic, wasn't it?
Yep.
And taken a number of pictures of this big iceberg that was called B15. It was dubbed B15. Again, you can see even in her folder, you get the maps and the blue of the water. And this one, what she's doing is looking at our environment and what's happening, particularly with this little iceberg. On the left are her journal pages, so that flips up and you'll see her entries that when she was there and watching the landscape, that winter icy landscape, and talking about the berg. And then this is B15 as she took a picture of it then. And then on the inside, you'll get how they envision the berg breaking up and the names they gave the berg as it floated away from the Antarctic. And again, it's looking at nature and what's happening, and another representation of just a small piece of our environment. So that's Rachel Simmons. Another material that is being used in books now are textile books. In this case, this is Lise Melhorn Bow, who is out of Canada, Kingston, Ontario, actually. The pandemic, being isolated, has had her really going through her store of scrap material people have given her, old clothes that she was going to donate. This latest book is called Heavy Threads. And a lot of her text she takes from poets. In this case, the poet was, I don't even have it down here. Originally, she was, it is Hazel Hall. And the poem is, when the dawn unfolds like a bolt of ribbon thrown through my window, I know that hours of light are about to thrust themselves into me like omnivorous needles into listless cloth, threaded with the heavy colors of the sun. She used the carousel structure, which I just found amazing, since she used cloth and had to make sure that it was able to stand and to show the words of the poem. She used some of it's hand painted, it's upholstery and quilt making fabrics, and embroidered table linens. Lindsay, are you doing two sewing?
I have it.
Okay. Two Sewing is another Hazel Hall poem that she did. Again, she's taking normally a regular book structure and making a textile book out of it. The little dashes that you see are meant to represent rain, because the total poem does talk about the rain as needles. The text refers to the wind as an embroiderer. And if you look at the flags, you'll see that she actually embroidered the spring flowers within the flags. She did an edition of 5, so she hand embroidered each one of these. The poem starts with, spring must have fine things to wear like other springs. Of silken green the grass must be, embroidered 1 and 2 and 3. So I really like that she's experimenting with structure. And a nice way to present that poem and bring it to life. The next artist is Sandra Trujillo. She's originally from California. She's now in Georgia teaching. We have 2 books. This one was actually produced in 2019. It's called Funeral Food. Both of the books are in the same style. She did this as part of a residency in Guadalajara, Mexico. She is Chicano. She took stories, this one particularly, Funeral Food, is about stories and food around the time of someone's death and the funeral around it. Sequencing is not, it's interesting because it's image and text. It's almost like a string of consciousness in her storytelling. There's no, what's the word I want? It's not prettified, but in this one, she tells things about De La Rosa's Good Punch. She tells things about the hot dogs that her cousin had a little hot dog machine, and all the cousins wanted to be sure they got there after school quickly, or else all the hot dogs would be gone. He would have eaten them all because there was only room for 4 hot dogs at a time. She talks about having breakfast one morning and having tortilla and eggs and giving me the recipe for that. You can see potluck at Stella's. She talks about in her stories about their neighbors. So it's a picture of a community, actually a diverse community, but also when you read the stories about the economic situation that she lived in at that time. This was originally an edition of 100. Well, it was an edition of 100, and it sold for $150. Her new book, which is similar format and was also done in Guadalajara, and is an edition of 100. It is really a continuation of the stories and the images about her family and her growing up time. This first image is her at the altar in church. This story is about her first time at confession and her siblings telling her she needed to confess, and her going to confessions thinking, oh, I don't have anything to confess. And then she starts just, spewing all these little things of hitting brothers and stealing a piece of candy. Then you'll have stories about her aunts and the making of beans. So you, with this one, as in the other one, you also have recipes that go along with the stories. It is interesting in all our cultures how much of our family time is around the preparing of food and the eating of food. It's just part of each culture's experience, I think. At least for me growing up, it was part of all of our time together. The last story in this book, which is in fact called Trouble, is where she and her sister are playing a game called Trouble, I guess in the kitchen. And their mother's new husband was making stuffed cabbage leaves. And the children were all being, I guess what we would say, disrespectful. And he was being kind and not exasperated. But at some point, the mother comes in, takes them all outside and says, "This is your new father. You will obey him. We are a family." So that was a really nice story at the end, that we are a family. So that's Sandra's new book, Trouble. See, I didn't see that. The next book is Encapsulated. This is a new book by Melissa Wagner Lawler. When you open this book, it does have a nice case. It encapsulates the book. It's a book about relationships. It uses that non-adhesive binding structure that Claire Van Fleet and Elizabeth Steiner, had a book about. Let me see. Let me walk in the other room just a minute.
Oops, I can't do that.
I'm sorry, we still have a business to run. So Encapsulated, I don't know if you can zoom in on me for just a minute, is the non-adhesive binding structure. And the poem, it's, and the oh, you got it? Okay, I'm sorry. The text is really about relationships, and I would guess that she actually ends it with, "Is anyone ever really bonded for life?" And but when you read the text, the little capsule in the base of the book is really burnt belongings, or burnt, I won't say debris, but you can see the non-adhesive binding sculpture. And the text goes something like this. And she uses, there's a phrase in here where you can see where the violet or purple color comes from as she weaves through the text. Somewhere between being and knowing, the truth of most everything, culminating in an experience, entanglement, is that the right word? A sober mind would observe this differently, with an objective lens, cleared properly, not filtered. The violet intensity of lavender floats by. ×2 makes the touch all that necessary. That particular bit of energy torn away unexpectedly. Is it possible to reframe this as trickery? A mind manipulation might make it easier to digest. Figuring out you fell too far, too quickly, too late. Is anyone ever really bonded for life? I really, when I was reading this and looking at the book, it made me think of a movie that I'd recently seen where there was a installation of a photography, and the installation was about touch and forgotten memories and memories of forgotten memories of touch, and so that those memories are really embedded in us, and we never really feel it. So I really thought about this little bit of debris that she has in that book. It's almost like it's memories encapsulated in a different way. We think maybe they're not there anymore, but they really are. And I may be making totally different out of what Melissa was saying, but that's what I came with. So that's encapsulated Melissa Wagner Lawler. Something interesting, kind of like an Amos Kennedy. If anybody has ever seen Amos Kennedy's broadsides and his printing, you know, he uses like the hat show print. And Lauren Emmeritz, who's Abstract Orange, did do a residency. I don't know that they called it that, but a residency at the show hat show print in Nashville. Her press is called Abstract Orange. Her favorite color is orange, and that's the reason she uses it. The Declaration of Human Rights is 31, I think, pages of taking the Declaration of Human Rights that was published in 1948 by the United Nations. And even though each of the rights or points are more words than she has printed, she's taken the essence of that point and put it into the bold type. Like right to life and liberty. Number 4 is no one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and the slave trade shall be prohibited in all their forms. But she, you know, picked that up. But you go through and it's all about individual rights and specific things like the right to consensual marriage, the freedom of thought and religion. They're all, you know, individual little broadsides, which would make an interesting display, I think, if you know of anybody that wanted to do an exhibition. Amos used to hang his broadsides up on a wall, and then people would just pick which one they wanted. She also, Lauren is out of Washington, D.C. She does make a lot of her, she hand carves some of her own type. So for instance, here you see a large version of a hand carved alphabet and a smaller version. And this is just very simple. It's the letters that she carved, and then she printed from those and used orange ink. And this is an accordion, and it stretches out. I don't know how far it stretches out, a long way. But I thought this would give you a glance at letterpress printing and someone actually hand carving their type. thought we'd stop about 10 till 3, or 10 till 1 your time, I guess. And what kind of tape did she use to hold the paper together? You know, Lindsay, that's just paper, isn't it?
It looks like paper.
Yeah, she doesn't say anything like some people use that. Can't think of what it's called right now, but and paint it, but that's not what she did here. I think it's all paper. Yeah, I don't have that down here. I'm sorry. I thought I would stop about 10 minutes before the hour, and that if you have questions or, okay. The next artist is Islam Ali. Some of you may know him. He's from Egypt. He came to the States and attended the book arts program at the University of Iowa. This is his latest book called Transpose. I really like this. This is a different structure for him. He used, as usually he does, I'm sorry. He used the dowels, so this looks like a wardrobe, and each of the pages come out. On one side, each one of them has a word on it. On one side it's in Arabic, and the other side it's English. These are what you call talisman shirts. I said that wrong. Talismanic shirts. Originally they were believed to be worn under armor to protect against, I guess, evil, as a shield in battles, and during illness used as protective amulets, and they were produced for ceremonial purposes. One of the things that Islam said is also a mark between wealth and being poor, because the wealthy could afford to purchase a nice talismanic shirt and put it away in a box or drawer and only bring it out for special occasions, but a poor man could not do that. There are 7 shirts, and the words are power, celebration, magic, prosperity, affection, peace, and health. Health. So he's hoping this challenges the notion of power and privilege. At the back of the base of the wardrobe, there's a quote from Virginia Woolf from Orlando that says, "There is much to support the view that it is clothes that wear us and not we them. We may make them take the mold of arm or breast, but they mold our hearts, our brains, our tongues to their liking." We do pay a lot of attention to clothes and how they're worn, what they're worn, color. You know, the advent of the industrial age and being able to, I guess in one of Cliff Metter's books, he talks about that the camera caused us to, people to start seeing themselves, and they began to have ornamentation in their clothes, and they became more, they weren't plain anymore. Julie Bognet is an artist from Minnesota. She has 2 books about the pandemic. This is one of them. This is When the World Was Asked to Shelter, the first 365 days. And she did actual daily entries for a journal all during this time, and they're in one. All of them are in one collection. But what she did was take excerpts from those journals, and then she took, when you look at the calendars, like she starts with March 2020, and when you look at the calendar that she also has on each one, there I was going to tell you what they're screen print, intaglio, and pochoir. And you can almost see in some of them the little stippling to make each day just a little bit different. For March, and as she goes through the year, she goes from March 2020 to February 2021, and each one has at least 3 little lines of text, or what she calls line poem, about that month. So March 2020, she started with "Safe at home, the sky is falling, let's put this in perspective." When you're looking at July 2020, what are people thinking? The bad science of reopening, spiraling out of control. Which then you get down to things like, what month are you on, Lindsay? March 2021. 1 year later, grim tallies, no easy answers. The page before this was a single little bird and a sentence that says, "Sad on so many levels." And I guess that's the way we think of the pandemic. There's so many levels, you can't even begin to describe everything that's going on with it. All right, let's see. I think time for maybe 1 or 2 more, and then we'll stop. Lindsay, which one? How about Fairmont color card? Fairmont color card is a new one from Sarah Bryant. She's Big Jump Press. She teaches in the MFA program at the University of Alabama. Her work is always lovely. The colophon is in the interior of the lid. This was when she's looking at clothing and consumerism and how clothing, we are influenced to buy clothing. So when she starts out with a quote from Paul, I think his name was Perret, which says, "All fashion ends in excess." He was actually a designer, and probably if you saw some of his fashions, you would recognize it. She's taken some of her clothing, a vest, jeans, a pink tank, a hot weather dress, an apron, a wedding dress, an interview shirt, a blue tank, sheets, and pajamas, and taken those pieces of cloth and woven those together in these little panoramas or collages of textile. That statement Lindsay was showing you is almost what I would think of as like a disclaimer that we see on a lot of clothing and materials. What she said was, while the greatest care is exercised in the manufacturing of our color materials, we cannot guarantee or be held responsible for absolute matches in colors. Is it sometimes impossible to avoid slight variations? This may be a happy omen for the future or become a threat to the serenity of life. So it was, and then she goes on and she has, I think, 6 additional cards. and each one of them, she has made a collage of these threads and materials of these garments that she wore. This one, I think it is becoming increasingly hard to create a burning desire for things. Or is this one the threatened overabundance? I can't remember. They are optional or luxury items. And she used the text comes from a book by, what's his name? Can't think of his name right now. Oh, The Wastemakers, written by Vance Packard in 1960. He was anti-consumerism. He wrote a lot of 2 or 3 books all about how America had become the great consumer hotspot, I guess you would call it. Yeah. He argues that people in the United States consume a lot more than they should and are harmed by their consumption. And that's kind of what she's trying to get us to think about with this book is clothes, materiality, and consumerism. There's also a reference to the Fairmont Color Code, which references the association that actually chooses colors every year. Okay, I think perhaps, Lindsay, do you want to do any other one right now that's a favorite of yours? Gertrude, let's do Gertrude. I'm sorry, I interrupted that. Gertrude is Naughty Dog Press, and if any of you know Emily Martin, she is just a fun person to be around. She's just fun and funny. But she's written several, done several artist books using Shakespeare's plays. This one, she did a play on Macbeth using Gertrude, and Gertrude poses 5 questions. One of the things that Emily says is that as you grow older, you become invisible. And at any rate, she thinks that Gertrude was overlooked. The questions in this play are, let's see, this one was, and she references the scene and act and quote from which she drew this question. This one is what is called slut shaming. Did I choose the wrong moment for a toast? And if you know Emily's work, you can really recognize her characters. Is this entire play an example of toxic masculinity? Would I have been happier not having a child? Poor Macbeth. And did he even propose to me? So I hope that kind of gave you a look of various styles and people around the country that are making work. Lots been going on during the pandemic. A number of artists have said they've been able to get back to their studios.
Vicky, this is Lucia. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your business
Sure.
and what it is that you do.
Sure.
Wow.
When Bill and I started, we traveled around the country visiting university collections. You probably heard somebody ask me about travel. We traveled anywhere from 3 or 4 days at a time to 5 or 6 weeks at a time. across the United States. We are based in Birmingham, Alabama. So when we went to Washington, we would be gone anywhere from 5 to 6 weeks, because along the way, we stop and call on collections. And that could mean we would meet with one librarian and just those selected books, or we could do like at Baylor, where we go in and would put out 75 to 100 books at a time. We at university, kind of similar to what we do at the University of Puget Sound in recent years, where we just have a big conference room. We go in and put out selected work. We try to, because we've been calling on universities and collections for so long, we have a pretty good idea of what their collecting criteria is. A lot of artists think, well, I've done this wonderful piece and it needs to be in this collection, but that's not really the way it works. But librarians have budgets, and those budgets are generally around specific collection criteria or subject content. For instance, Stanford. When you go into Stanford, you would meet with 5 or 6 bibliographers at a time. They have one for British and American literature. They have one for American history and British history, a Hispanic, a Judaica, an art library, Slavic literature. So we would, when we would go in, we would look at what we were traveling with, and we would say, okay, these are the books that we need to show them. Of course, we always put in things that we just thought they should see, but as a business, what you're trying to do is make sure you get work that suits that criteria and that collection will purchase. So, and then we had a website. We also did online catalogs periodically. And pretty much that's what we did up until the pandemic hit. And then when the pandemic hit, and of course, Bill was gone by then, Lindsay and I traveled a little bit before the pandemic hit. But once the pandemic hit, we didn't know what we were going to do, because that was getting books in front of a person so they could touch them and turn the pages and walk around them and feel them and see. That's the best way to sell an artist's book by far. But what we incidentally happened into Zoom, because we had a librarian that wanted to see a particular artist's work. We didn't have it on site, and we asked her if she would be willing to do a Zoom. So we had a 3-way Zoom going on, and it worked so well that then that librarian wanted to see other work, and we set up with her to show her a lot of other work via using the phone. And it just kind of progressed from there. So I, instead of emailing to say, can we come visit, I say, can we Zoom? And it's been, we've done very well with that. We end up with generally about 1 Zoom meeting a week, except for the holiday months. So that's pretty much what we're doing right now. We keep up our website. I still do a lot of interacting with librarians when they're looking for something, and I send lists. So that's pretty much what we're doing right now.
So if you have, if you're an artist and you say an artist wanted to show you their work that someone you don't represent,
Okay.
how does that process work?
What we normally do is, as most everybody knows, we only work on consignment. And so we have a consignment form. If somebody contacts us, generally via email, and what we ask when you contact us by email is that you introduce yourself. You either link us to your website, and say which books you're interested in us representing, or you send us images and description when you contact us. What we do is we look at the work, and if Lindsay and I think it's something that we can place or find a home for that work, then we'll ask you to send us a copy or maybe 2 copies. And yes, the work is always set up on our website. Sometimes it takes us a little while, but because we actually don't do the website. I send all the information, and actually Des does our website for us. Let's see what. So we have a consignment agreement. If you contact us via email and send us descriptions or a link to your website, and then we'll go from there. We didn't have Zoom before, and this is the way Bill and I did it prior to 2020, and so we've just kind of continued that as well. We have visited artists at home when we traveled, but that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Hey, just a quick note, Yuki noticed or mentioned in the chat that about our Instagram and our TikTok, and that's one way we are using, or one way that we are showing work is through those medias. And a lot of people who get a little overwhelmed with our website often will find a space on Instagram where they can look at the books and not feel too overwhelmed.
And we do get everything on our website, but we don't necessarily get everything on Instagram, because that's another activity. It's just me and Lindsay, and so that's just another activity. She's really been trying, as new work comes in, to get new work on, and we are trying to prioritize some older work and get it uploaded as well.
Vicky, there's a question on the about Codex, and will the work be set up? I believe you said you're not going to Codex this year.
No, I'm not going to Codex. I am going to do, I hope, a little catalog that I'm going to send out to librarians. It may not get on the website that soon, but it will be a work that I would have shown, we would have set up if we had been attending Codex, which you saw some of it today.
Vicky, this is Bonnie Thompson Norman. I just want to say that, you know, thanks to you, selling my books last year, it was the largest source of income for me.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, that's on me, not you, but
we sold a lot of your work last year.
You certainly did. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I too had never heard of Zoom before. And it's been a challenge, you know, for all of us to learn all about it. But the fact that you sort of figured it out, and you and Lindsay figured it out and did so spectacularly, at least on my behalf, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Well, it's been really, you know, some librarians don't like it and they don't want to do it. We have a couple of customers that I just send list, or they go to the website and then they tell me what they want. But for a lot of librarians doing it this way, they really like it. It's very concentrated. We don't get to show as many books to a librarian as we would if we were visiting, because when we would visit, we kind of do like we did at the University of Puget Sound, where we could put out a lot of work, and then what caught the librarian's eye, or maybe something that we knew particularly fit their criteria, we would talk about, but mostly we left that kind of up to them. We are not, I hate to use stereotypes, but we're not used car salesmen where we go in and we, you know, say, oh, you've got to have this. You've got to have it. We don't, you know, that's not what we do. And we let the work speak for itself. So with Zoom, it has been a challenge, because what Lindsay and I do is, like, we have a Zoom meeting Tuesday with university. And well, I haven't gotten that list together yet. But what I'll do is I'll look and see, well, when was the last time they bought work? What did they buy? Did we Zoom with them? Did we have a visit? What did we show them? And then we'll see what's come in since then. Or if maybe their collecting subject areas have changed any. And so we put that list together, and then Lindsay and I go through it and say, okay, what of this, because it may be 100 items. And we'll go through and say, okay, what of this really makes sense to show them? And we'll narrow it down. We'll send a list then. I'll send a list Monday to this university and say, here's what we're going to be pulling from. Because like I sent a list to y'all, but we did not show you everything because you can only show so many books within an hour. And so we'll narrow that down. We'll actually number or rank, if you will, like 20 items to get us started. And then we'll go through and start showing those books. Unless the librarian emails us back and says, or at the beginning of the session says, I want to be sure and see this, 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 and this. And then we'll start with those, and then we'll begin to fill in with the other things we think they might be interested in. Lindsay, is that pretty much, did I describe that pretty much?
Yep.
Were you listening, Lindsay?
I just had myself on mute, so you didn't hear me tippity tapping.
So that's pretty much what we do is she and I go together and look at that, and then we rank it, and then we talk about those. Actually, Lindsay usually talks a little bit more than she did today. I don't think she talked at all today, but
I get a little intimidated. There's still 23 people in the chat.
Anybody else?
Well, Vicky, if you don't mind, this is Bonnie again.
Yeah.
I worked for a rare book dealer, and then with my first husband, we started a rare bookstore. And when he passed away, the University of Utah wrote an extensive memoriam about him and how he built the collections that they have in special collections. And just hearing you talk about how you and Lindsay prepare for meeting with a librarian, I think people don't usually understand that the great contribution that rare book dealers and dealers in specialty areas like yours make to university libraries. University libraries and other public institutions make their work available to a larger swath of people than one usually thinks of. And librarians aren't, much as they would like to have every book in the world, for their own, that relates to their collection or something. The fact that dealers are so intimately familiar with what their collections are across the breadth of the university, because universities don't just have one library, they have several libraries. I think the University of Washington has 17 different libraries. Yeah. And so you've just pointed out the service that you and Lindsay do in the field of books and research and institutional collections by just curating what the librarians themselves will see and helping them build their collections. It isn't just because you say, let's just throw a bunch of books at them. You're looking at what their institution needs and how you can fulfill those needs for their students and researchers.
Well, yes, and especially with these Zoom meetings, even though it's been a real blessing, if you think about it, when you're showing and you're watching and trying to absorb everything, at some point you become overwhelmed or tired. And so we find that after you get past an hour, you may be able to go an hour and a half, but Lindsay, we've had maybe 2 times in the last year or so where somebody's gone more than 2 hours, and we were flagging, but the librarian wanted to get in as much as she could at the time. And so we stayed with it, but and also, Bonnie, like you said, you have to be very precise with what you show, because I think I said Lindsay and I figured out that about 20 to 22 books an hour is about the best you can do, especially if you have a
Or
book
if
that
they're
takes a
ebooks
lot of
too.
explanation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Bonnie, I was gonna say, for as far as to your point, it really does help when the artist makes a book that covers a lot of bases. And this last year, a lot of collections have been really seeking politically charged books or books that make you think about, what's going on in the world right now. And on top of that, they're also looking for structure to help teach. And so, you hit a lot of points with a lot of your books. And like Vicky said, the books really sell themselves as long as we can get them in front of somebody. Then that's really what it's all about. And for budding artists or people wondering if their books are going to sell or their work is going to sell, those are points that we really try to make to new artists, is that you want to make sure that your topics are applicable to what collections are looking for, and that your book is covering more than just one thing. If the more you can get out of one piece of artwork, the more possibilities you're going to have for your art to get seen in various collections.
It's like an example would be like the Sandra Trujillo book, Funeral Food. Even though it hits Chicano studies, it also hits, there are funeral collections, lots of culinary collections, lots of family relation collections. I mean, it just hits a lot of buttons. That doesn't mean everybody will buy it, but it does give it a chance.
Well, this has been great, and this might be a great chance to wrap it up and give a huge thanks to Lindsay and Vicky. This has been so informative. So yes, so wonderful to see some of the work and how you work. It's been great. Thank you for your
Oh,
generosity.
thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody for coming too.